Let's talk a little bit today about school organization. And I will start you off with a picture of my old school. This is Cassidy School in Lexington, Kentucky. There are different kinds of schools, more than you might actually realize, but they're generally divided into two different categories. There are private schools and there are public schools. Now, among the private schools, the general categories are independent or religious. An independent school would sort of model the old British idea of an independent school, Oxford, Cambridge, that sort of thing. Here in central Kentucky, examples of that would be something like Sayre or the Lexington School. Many more private schools are religiously affiliated. All of the parochial schools run by the Catholic Diocese, the Lexington Christian Academy, just to name a couple. These are schools that operate privately, but they have a religious function to them. Since about 1990 or so, America has seen a fairly sharp increase in the number of people who have been homeschooling their children. As more support in the way of curriculum and materials and little groups that gather kids together have formed since that time, more parents have felt like they've been able to give their students a good, or their children a good homeschool education, and have chosen that option. The public schools in America are funded like so many of our other services are. We're able to drive on roads because we all pitch in order to support the maintenance, the building and the maintenance of those roads and bridges, and we're able to go to a library because we support them publicly with our taxes. The same thing is true of our schools, and they are supported through a state property tax, which is collected locally, and those taxes yield a different amount depending on the value of the property that's being taxed. So if you live in a great big home, you're paying a higher amount of money because you can afford it, and you're supporting the schools to a greater degree than if you live in a very small home. And that's the way the structure is operated. Now, since there is no mention of education in the U.S. Constitution, anything that is not mentioned in the Constitution then becomes the province of the state. The 10th Amendment says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. This is known as the Reserve Clause of the U.S. Constitution. So since the U.S. Constitution doesn't mention education, the Kentucky Constitution does. And in Section 183, the Kentucky Constitution says, "The General Assembly shall, by appropriate legislation, provide for an efficient system of common schools throughout the state." There's kind of a lot packed into that language, and in 1989 there was a huge case in Kentucky where the Kentucky Supreme Court decided what all of that meant. Part of what it means is that the General Assembly, those are our elected representatives that meet in Frankfurt, that General Assembly is the group that's in charge of education in our state. And it's their job to provide a system of schools where any student can get an adequate education, and they need to provide that efficient schooling throughout the state. So it doesn't matter if you live in Pikeville or Paducah, you can be assured to get an adequate education. Now, as you'll learn in EDF 203, the history of our schooling didn't exactly work out that way. Instead, we sort of have a system of good schools and bad schools. And so that equity remains a concern in Kentucky. Now, the power to actually run the schools is given by the legislature to a state board of education and a Kentucky Department of Education and to all of the local school boards. And those school board members are elected from each community, and they've got the power to govern the schools as long as they follow the laws and regulations that they receive from the Kentucky Department of Education. Here's an example of our largest Board of Education, the one in Jefferson County. This is a day when I think it was Be Nice to Your Board of Education Member Day or something along those lines. And so you'll see a number of students that are standing there behind the board members. And inside the brackets, I show you the 7 members of the Jefferson County School Board, along with Superintendent Donna Hargens on the far left. Most of your Kentucky boards of education only have 5 members. Jefferson County, because of its size, has the largest in the state. Now, the chief administrator of the school district is that superintendent, and the superintendent is hired and fired by the Board of Education. The superintendent then runs the district office, and they have a large staff in Jefferson County, and they also put lead administrators in each of the local schools. Those lead administrators are called principals. And all of those folks have to be approved by the Board of Education. Here is just a snippet of the Jefferson County Public Schools organizational chart. And it shows the Board of Education at the top. The superintendent reports directly to the Board of Education. The superintendent has legal counsel that talks to them, an internal auditor that deals with financial matters, and an ombudsman who is sort of a troubleshooter, who takes care of any issues that may come up with the faculty or other employees. And then there's a whole structure underneath that superintendent that deals with operations, community relations, certain federal programs, finances, and data management and program evaluation. And then on the far left, you'll see the chief academic officer. And all of the schools then would fall under that chief academic officer. Now, each school in Kentucky has a school-based decision-making council. And the school operates under Kentucky law. They have actually decent authority in the areas of curriculum and instruction. But there's a big caveat that goes with that. No school council can afford to do anything too terribly different from whatever it is the students are assessed on. Therefore, it's difficult for a school council to do anything wildly creative, knowing that their students are going to be assessed based on the Common Core and the state curriculum. So while the school-based council might be able to tweak around the edges and come up with different kinds of approaches to how the school is operated, that is usually somewhat limited as a result. Now, school councils are elected, and they are composed of teachers, parents, and administrators. And there is a legally imposed ratio of 3 teachers to 2 parents to 1 administrator in each school. But if you're in a larger school, take Dunbar High School in Lexington, they double that. So they have 6 teachers, 4 parents, and 2 principals that serve on that council. School council law stipulates that every year the council has to review its student performance data. That is, the principal has to bring to the council their test results and other kinds of issues that indicate how well the school is doing or how poorly the school is doing. And in that way, the school council can make decisions about what kinds of improvements need to occur. Not only that, but the test score data that is presented to the council has to be disaggregated. And what that means is it has to be broken down by race, gender, disability, and whether or not students participate in the free or reduced lunch program, which is our indicator of socioeconomic status. And so the reason for this is it used to be, before 1992 or 3, I suppose, that schools only reported their student test data in the aggregate. They gave school means, so they would just show average test scores. However, by doing that, it was able to hide, schools were able to hide as much as 1/3 of their school population where the students weren't doing very well. And so the school council law that was passed in 1990 required that all student performance data be disaggregated. School council authority is somewhat broad within the school. Disciplinary policies, curriculum changes, staffing, scheduling, these are the kinds of things that would fall under school council authority. So if you were a member of a school council or a teacher that was working on a school council, where might you look if you wanted to create school improvement? And here are 9 suggested places for you to look. Check out the curriculum. Does the school have a curriculum? And are the teachers following the curriculum? Do they have the help that they need from school leadership to make sure that they're coordinated and their curriculum is aligned so that we don't have teachers teaching the same thing? Remember, the focus on a curriculum is always to make sure that as a student progresses through the school, their program makes sense, that they don't repeat stuff over and over again. Back in the 1980s, I was visiting a new school that I had just been assigned to at Meadowthorpe in Lexington. While I was visiting classes, I happened to go into a kindergarten class, and I noticed that they were studying dinosaurs, and they were having a big time. The kids had little trays on their desk with sand in them and these little plastic dinosaurs and a little place for water, and they would march their brontosaurus across the sand and have him drink, and they just had a big time. So then I moved on and I went to a first grade class, and I'll be darned if they weren't studying dinosaurs, because the kids love dinosaurs and the teachers love teaching lessons that the kids love. Well, you can't have kids studying the same thing year after year. A little later that day, I went into a second grade class and saw kids learning about the rainforest. And the teacher had the class decorated, and they had things hanging from the ceilings, and the windows were kind of covered with this sort of blue plastic to give the classroom kind of the shady look. And they all lived in the rainforest in the class, and the kids liked it. And as you might guess, a little later I visited a third grade class, and they were studying the rainforest. So it's very important that we have an aligned curriculum so that as the students move through the program, they're getting the kinds of experiences they need, rather than just having teachers teach the things that they most enjoy teaching. Also, classroom evaluation is important. As you know from being a student yourself, some teachers are better than others. And the ability of the school system to look for areas of concern and teachers that need to do a better job and provide assistance for teachers that need to do a better job is important. It's equally important that we recognize those teachers that are already doing a great job and supporting them and trying to help them do even better. You certainly want to take a look at your student achievement data and watch the instruction that goes on in classes. That would be a place to look for improvement. Do you really have high quality teachers in your school? You would want to take a look at the school culture and understand something about what it's like to go to school in that place. Similar to that are looking at the students, the family, and the community support in that school. Is that a school that you would want your children to go to? Is the school culture and the community support such that every child gets to play and everybody has a feeling of belonging in the school? How is business done? Is it a harsh place to go where teachers are critical of students, or do they have the support that they need? These are all very important things to look at. I often advised parents who were thinking about what school they wanted their children to go there. Go in the building, walk around some, breathe the air, watch the way the adults and the children interact with one another. Those are very important things that are going to be good clues about the atmosphere in the school and whether or not a given child is going to be successful there. Professional growth is certainly important, and there ought to be a plan for each faculty member to plan their own professional growth and development. They should report on it. They should talk to the principal about it. They should be supported by the school district. When they know that they need more training in something, the district ought to be there to lend a hand. School leadership is critically important. If you're in a school with a bad principal, that is a difficult circumstance. Leadership needs to be focused on what it is teachers and students need and that principal ought to be doing everything they can to support that endeavor. What about the organizational structure and the resources in the school? Sometimes we have well-intended school administrators that don't really know how to organize people to really be effective and efficient in school operations, and that's very important. And those resources are critical to teachers. Do you have science teachers that have the equipment they need in order to give students the kind of instruction they're going to need to be 21st century learners? That's very important. And as a part of that, strategic planning. Do you have a school leader and a faculty that understand what their strengths and weaknesses are and are working along with the school council to develop and implement a strategic plan that will bolster things where they need propping up? Now, we tend to think of schools as kind of being the same, but actually they're not. They vary widely. We've got large schools, small schools. We've got schools that serve kids from different kinds of environment, urban schools, rural schools, suburban schools. We have schools that tend to serve a large percentage of kids from upper economic levels, and some schools that serve a large percentage of kids from lower economic levels. And it all matters. Each of these factors and variables will shape what the experience is like in the school. We have some schools that get a whole lot of money, and a lot of money is spent per pupil in the schools. And we have other schools where that's not quite the case. So we still have inequity in school funding. And research has suggested that when you're going to create improvement in the school, the way you do it is at the lowest level possible. The individual school building is really the unit of change when it comes to school improvement. And when it comes to closing achievement gaps, nothing is more important than taking a look at the needs of each individual child. And that's kind of the challenge in teaching, and particularly in public education. Because what we're really doing is we're working with everyone's children, not just our own kids. Our own kids are easy enough to love. And when we send our own children to school, we have pretty high expectations for what it is the school will bring to them. But education is a common good. It's important to all of us that all of our children have a high quality education, because we're going to be depending on all of the kids to become competent, productive adults. And so in this way, it's important that we all support good schools.